On her wedding night, Sari tilts her head and laughs, revealing a small crescent scar that turns her husband's world upside down. 3 years ago, Sheikh paid $25,000 for Lot 7 from a trafficking ring. Tonight, he discovers his bride and his property are the same woman. Sari Minang had never seen the ocean before the day she left Batam. At 22, she had spent her entire life in the small Indonesian village of Palembang, where generations of her family had farmed the same plot of land. The oldest of 5 children, she watched her parents age prematurely under the weight of medical bills after her youngest brother, a diffeer, developed a rare blood disorder requiring expensive treatments. The family's meager savings disappeared within months, forcing her father to sell portions of their ancestral land to moneylenders at predatory rates. "There is work in Dubai," her cousin EKA had told her confidently over a cup of bitter tea in their family's small kitchen. "Clean houses for rich people get paid in dirhams. 1 month there equals 1 year of farming here." Aka's hair was newly highlighted, her nails manicured, luxuries unimaginable in their village. She wore gold earrings that caught the dim light filtering through the kitchen's only window. "How would I even get there?" Sari asked, absently stroking the small crescent-shaped scar behind her left ear, a childhood injury from falling against their old water pump. Ka smiled. "My friend Dien works for an agency. They handle everything: passport, visa, transportation. They even arrange housing with the employer. All you need is your birth certificate and 500,000 rupiah for processing fees." The amount represented nearly 2 months of her family's income. But EKA had produced a glossy brochure showing gleaming skyscrapers, luxurious homes, and smiling women in modest uniforms standing beside affluent Arab families. 2 years of work, and you can come back with enough money to buy back all your father's land and pay for a diffeer's treatments, EKA promised. That night, as her family slept on thin mats spread across the dirt floor of their home, Sari stared at the ceiling, calculating possibilities. By morning, her decision was made. Her mother wept at the bus station, clutching Sari's hands. "Be careful, my daughter. Remember your prayers. Call us when you arrive." "I'll send money soon," Sari promised, her throat tight with emotion. The recruitment office in Jakarta was unexpectedly modern, glass and chrome, staffed by professional-looking women in hijabs who processed paperwork with practiced efficiency. Dien, Aka's friend, greeted Sari warmly, collecting her birth certificate and the precious 500,000 rupiah her family had scraped together. "You'll be part of a special group leaving tomorrow," Dien explained, sliding a contract across the desk. "Fast-tracked for priority employers. Sign here." Sari hesitated, noticing the contract was entirely in Arabic with no Indonesian translation. "What does it say?" "Standard terms: 2-year employment as a domestic helper, room and board provided, 1,200 dirhams monthly, 1 day off per week." Diane's expression revealed nothing. "We have many applicants for these positions, Sari. If you're uncomfortable." Sari thought of a diffeer's pale face, of her father's stooped shoulders. She signed. The special group consisted of 17 other women ranging from 18 to 25. They were housed overnight in a dormitory near the port, their passports collected for processing. At dawn, they were loaded into a windowless van and driven to a private dock where a cargo ship waited. "Where are our passports?" asked a girl named Intan, barely 18 with frightened eyes. "On board," replied the handler, a heavy-set man who hadn't bothered to introduce himself. "You'll receive them when we dock in Dubai." It was only when they were led toward a massive shipping container that the first wave of real fear hit Sari. The container's interior had been crudely modified. Basic ventilation holes drilled near the ceiling, plastic buckets in one corner for sanitation, pallets stacked with water bottles and crackers. "What is this?" Sari demanded, instinctively stepping back. "We were promised proper transport." The handler's face hardened. "Get in or stay here with nothing. Your choice." One girl tried to run. 2 men caught her before she'd taken 5 steps, dragging her screaming toward the container. The others watched, frozen in horror. "Better to comply now," whispered a woman beside Sari. perhaps 25 with knowing eyes. Save your strength for when it matters. Inside the container, the heat was immediately suffocating despite the crude ventilation. As the heavy doors slammed shut, plunging them into near darkness broken only by a single battery-operated lamp, Sari felt the last of her naive optimism die. When the container was lifted onto the ship, the violent swaying caused several girls to vomit. The stench became unbearable within hours. Time lost meaning in the metal box. Days blended into nights, marked only by temperature changes. They rationed water, helped each other use the degrading bucket toilets, whispered prayers, and shared fragmented life stories. 2 girls developed fevers. One became delirious, her incoherent mumblings adding to the psychological torment of their confinement. "They're not taking us to be housemaids, are they?" Inton asked on what might have been the 3rd day, her voice barely audible. Sari, who had emerged as an unofficial leader, couldn't bring herself to confirm what they all now suspected. Sheikh Zahir al-Rashid examined the digital catalog on his tablet, scrolling through images and descriptions with the detached interest of a man reviewing investment properties. At 47, he had cultivated a careful public image: reclusive art collector, quiet philanthropist, patron of traditional Arabic culture. His private life remained precisely that, private. "This shipment includes exceptional specimens," remarked Farid, the broker, watching Zahir's reactions carefully. They sat in Zahir's private office, a minimalist space dominated by a single enormous abstract painting worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. All young, all healthy, all without family connections that might become problematic. Zahir swiped through the images. Young women posed against neutral backgrounds, wearing modest clothing, expressions carefully blank. Each listing included height, weight, educational background, temperament assessment, and specialties. The clinical presentation made the transaction feel sanitized, disconnected from the human reality it represented. "This one," Zahir said, pausing on lot 7. A slender Indonesian woman with long black hair and eyes that, despite obvious efforts to appear compliant, retained a quiet intelligence. "Tell me more." Farid leaned forward. "Excellent choice. Indonesian, 22, from an agricultural background. Basic education but speaks some English. Noted for careful hands, attention to detail. Classified as docile, trainable. No previous history. No previous history was code. No previous sexual experience documented, though the broker's assessments were notoriously unreliable. Zahir felt a familiar twinge of conscience, quickly suppressed. He was not like the others who purchased these women for pure exploitation. He provided comfortable quarters, respectful treatment. He was selective, discriminating. He told himself this made a difference. 25,000, Zahir said, naming a figure well above market rate. Farid's eyebrows rose slightly. "A premium price. I pay for quality and discretion." The transaction was completed with the sterile efficiency that characterized all their dealings. Encrypted transfer, digital confirmation, no paper trail. Lot 7 would be delivered to his Al-Barari villa within the week, where his staff had prepared the usual accommodations. The matter concluded, Zahir returned to reviewing acquisition proposals for his upcoming exhibition of contemporary Middle Eastern art, his public passion. That evening, as he sipped 30-year-old scotch on his penthouse terrace overlooking the Dubai skyline, he allowed himself a moment of uncomfortable honesty. These purchases had become more frequent, the satisfaction they provided increasingly fleeting. Yet he continued, driven by appetites he chose not to examine too closely, protected by wealth that ensured consequences remained theoretical, distant. The shipping container doors opened onto blinding sunlight and suffocating desert heat. After the perpetual darkness, the brightness was painful, causing the women to shield their eyes as they were roughly helped, some nearly carried onto dry land. Sari's legs nearly buckled. Weak from days of confinement and minimal nutrition, the air smelled of salt, sand, and diesel fuel. They stood in a private loading area, surrounded by high walls. Beyond the compound, Sari could see the distant silhouettes of Dubai's iconic skyline, the very buildings from the glossy brochure that now seemed to belong to another lifetime. A man in an expensive suit approached, clipboard in hand, flanked by two larger men with expressionless faces. "Processing begins now," he announced in accented English. "You will be examined, documented, and prepared for delivery. Cooperation means comfort. Resistance means consequences." They were loaded into a refrigerated delivery truck, a cruel irony after the container's stifling heat, and transported to a nondescript warehouse. Inside, stations had been set up with clinical efficiency: medical examination, photography, documentation, clothing distribution. Sari watched as the first girls were processed, understanding now the full horror of their situation. They were inventory being prepared for sale. The medical examination was invasive, humiliating, conducted by a woman in a lab coat who avoided eye contact. The photography session positioned them like mannequins, faces carefully neutral, different angles captured for potential buyers. When her turn came, Sari moved mechanically through the stations, her mind detached from her body as a survival mechanism. She answered questions minimally, followed instructions robotically. They recorded the small crescent-shaped scar behind her left ear in her documentation. "Batch 1 prepares for first delivery," announced the supervisor after processing was complete. 6 women, including Sari, were selected, dressed in simple but clean clothing, and loaded into a luxury SUV with tinted windows. The others watched with empty eyes, understanding that their own deliveries would follow. The vehicle traveled through Dubai's outskirts, eventually entering Al-Barari, an exclusive enclave of luxury villas surrounded by lush gardens improbably thriving in the desert climate. Sari memorized every turn, every landmark, her survival instincts sharpening even as fear threatened to paralyze her. The SUV stopped before an imposing gate that opened electronically. As they pulled into a circular driveway, Sari noted the villa's size, the absence of neighboring properties within view, the discreet security cameras positioned strategically around the perimeter. "First delivery," the driver announced into a radio. "Lot 7 for Al Rashid residence." A moment of clarity crystallized in Sari's mind. This was her only chance. The alternative was unthinkable. As the driver opened the passenger door and turned to help the first woman out, Sari moved with desperate speed. She shoved past him, sprinting toward the still open gate, ignoring the shouts behind her. She ran blindly, bare feet bleeding on the manicured gravel path, lungs burning, aware of pursuit but driven by pure survival instinct. Beyond the gate, she veered off the main road into landscaped desert terrain, using the decorative boulders and sparse vegetation for minimal cover. The security team's flashlights cut through the gathering darkness as she pushed deeper into the desert, the temperature dropping rapidly with nightfall. Sari had no plan beyond immediate escape, no concept of where safety might lie in this foreign land. Her clothing, thin cotton unsuited for desert nights, provided little protection against the dropping temperature. She ran until her legs gave out, collapsing behind a large formation of rocks. The villa's lights were distant now, the pursuit seemingly abandoned at the property's boundaries. Wrapping her arms around herself against the growing cold, Sari fought to control her breathing, to think beyond the moment. Hypothermia would claim her by morning if she remained exposed. Moving was essential, but which direction offered hope rather than further danger? Distant headlights appeared on what seemed to be a service road. Gathering her remaining strength, Sari forced herself toward them, waving desperately as a small car approached. The vehicle slowed, a modest sedan with a single occupant. The window lowered to reveal a woman in her 40s, Filipino by her features, wearing medical scrubs. "Please," Sari gasped, her voice raw. "Help me." The woman hesitated, then quickly unlocked the passenger door. "Get in," she said urgently. "Quickly." As Sari collapsed into the seat, the woman accelerated, checking her rearview mirror nervously. "I'm Maria," she said, her expression a mixture of concern and wariness. "What happened to you?" "They brought us in a container," Sari whispered, the reality of her situation finally hitting her fully. "They were going to sell me." Maria's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "I've seen this before," she said quietly. "Too many times." She made a decision, nodding to herself. I'm taking you home. It's not safe, but it's safer than here. Sari stared out the window at the Dubai skyline growing closer, the gleaming towers indifferent to the darkness that flourished in their shadows. She had escaped one container only to find herself in a larger, more beautiful prison. But for now, at least she was free. Maria's apartment was barely large enough for one person. A studio in an aging building in Al Quoz, Dubai's industrial district. The bathroom was hardly bigger than a closet, the kitchen reduced to a hot plate, mini refrigerator, and a sink with perpetually low water pressure. But to Sari, after the shipping container and her desperate flight through the desert, it seemed like salvation. You can stay 3 days, Maria said firmly, placing a first aid kit on the small folding table that served as both dining area and workspace. After that, it becomes too dangerous. For both of us. Maria worked as a nurse at a private clinic catering to wealthy expatriates, but moonlighted at various healthcare facilities to send money back to her family in Manila. She had seen enough trafficking victims through hospital emergency rooms to recognize the signs, to understand the mechanisms that kept Dubai's shadow economy functioning. Let me see your feet, she instructed, gesturing for Sari to sit. The desert's rough terrain had left Sari's feet lacerated and swollen. Maria cleaned the wounds with practiced efficiency, applying antiseptic and bandages with gentle hands. They'll be looking for you, she said matter-of-factly. Not the police, they won't involve authorities. But they'll have people. You can't be Sari Minang anymore. That night, Sari slept on a thin mattress on the floor, waking repeatedly from nightmares of suffocation in the metal container. By morning, Maria had formulated a plan. First, we change how you look, she declared, placing shopping bags on the table. She had risen early to visit the Filipino market, purchasing hair dye, colored contact lenses, and second-hand clothing. Then we create new papers. Then we find you work, cash jobs, nothing official. The transformation began immediately. Maria worked with methodical precision, dyeing Sari's long black hair a chestnut brown, teaching her to apply makeup that subtly altered the appearance of her facial features. The colored contacts changed her dark eyes to a lighter brown, not dramatic enough to appear artificial, but sufficient to create doubt in anyone working from her original description. Walk differently, Maria instructed, demonstrating. Roll your shoulders back, take longer strides. People remember how you move as much as how you look. Sari practiced until her body ached, learning to inhabit this new physical presence. Maria taught her basic Arabic phrases, essential for survival in Dubai's service economy. They crafted a simple backstory. She was Nadia Rama, of mixed Indonesian-Malaysian heritage, in Dubai for 3 years already. The more specific details you include, the more believable it becomes, Maria explained. But never elaborate unless asked directly. Answer questions, then redirect. On the 3rd day, a friend of Maria's arrived, a nervous Filipino man who worked at a printing shop. He took photos of the transformed Sari, returning hours later with a rudimentary identification card. Not a passport, not formally legal, but sufficient to satisfy cursory inspections by those who didn't look too closely. This will get you through basic situations, Maria explained, but never show it to actual authorities. When Sari attempted to thank her, Maria shook her head firmly. I've seen too many girls like you disappear, she said simply. Some choices are not really choices at all. Nadia Rama. Sari forced herself to think with the new name, even in private thoughts. Entered Dubai's shadow economy through its service entrance. Maria had connected her with a cleaning supervisor at a commercial office building, a Bangladeshi man who asked few questions of employees willing to work night shifts for cash wages. Be invisible, the supervisor advised during her first shift. Clean thoroughly but quickly. Never make eye contact with security guards. Never engage in conversation with late-working executives. The work was exhausting but straightforward. Emptying trash bins, vacuuming carpets, cleaning bathrooms, dusting endless surfaces of glass and chrome. She worked from midnight until 5 a.m., sleeping during daylight hours in a crowded apartment shared with 8 other undocumented workers. 4 to a room, mattresses on floors, privacy reduced to hanging sheets. She paid weekly for her corner of the room, moving every 3 months as Maria had instructed. The constant relocation prevented neighbors from becoming too curious, landlords from asking too many questions, patterns from forming that might attract attention. During daylight hours, when sleep proved elusive, she took additional work at a laundromat owned by a Palestinian family. They paid her to fold clothes, manage the ancient washing machines, and keep the small establishment clean. The wife, Fatima, sometimes brought her homemade food, never asking about her background but recognizing the hunted look that characterized all of Dubai's shadow residents. Nadia developed a system for survival. She maintained no social media presence, avoided cameras, paid only in cash, kept no bank account. She memorized the patrol patterns of police in each neighborhood she inhabited, learned which security guards could be trusted and which were informants for various interests. She walked everywhere, avoiding the traceable metro system except when absolutely necessary. The constant vigilance was exhausting. Every siren caused her heart to race. Every official uniform triggered an immediate fight or flight response. She developed the ability to scan rooms instantly for exits, to assess threats in microseconds, to disappear into crowds with practiced ease. Underneath Nadia's carefully constructed facade, Sari remained, damaged but undefeated. She allowed herself one small ritual of remembrance. Each month, she wrote letters to her family that she never sent, recording her true experiences in her native language. These she kept hidden in a small waterproof pouch, her only connection to her authentic self. The first shelter came 4 months after her escape. Winter had brought unexpectedly heavy rains, flooding the basement apartment where she had been staying. With nowhere to go and limited funds, she found herself huddled in the doorway of a small corner grocery store, soaked and shivering. The elderly Egyptian owner, Mahmoud, found her there after closing. Instead of chasing her away, he offered a practical solution. The storage room had a cot where his nephew sometimes slept when helping with inventory. She could stay there temporarily in exchange for helping open the shop each morning and assisting with stocking. "I ask no questions," Mahmoud said simply. "Allah judges our compassion more than our curiosity." The arrangement lasted 2 months. Mahmoud was respectful, never entering the storage room without knocking, providing basic meals, making no demands beyond the agreed-upon work. When his nephew announced plans to return permanently, Mahmoud gave Nadia 3 days' notice and a small envelope containing more dirham than their arrangement had warranted. The second shelter came through desperation. Working a cleaning shift at the office tower, she had encountered a Pakistani foreman overseeing renovations on the 15th floor. After several nights of polite exchanges, Farid offered alternative accommodation, a sectioned-off area in the construction camp where his workers lived. "Private space, relatively clean," he explained. "In exchange, you cook for my crew twice weekly." The reality proved more complicated. The privacy was minimal, the conditions basic. After 2 weeks, Farid made his actual expectations clear: companionship of an intimate nature. Nadia, with nowhere else to go and winter approaching again, made the calculation countless women in her position had made before her. The arrangement lasted 4 months, ending when Farid's crew was reassigned to Abu Dhabi. The third shelter was the back room of a Lebanese restaurant, arranged through a connection from the laundromat. The owner, Samir, offered lodging in exchange for dishwashing and occasional serving duties. The space was little more than a converted pantry, but it offered security and relative privacy. Samir maintained a professional distance initially, but as weeks passed, his late-night visits to the kitchen where she worked alone became more frequent, his conversations more personal. When his hand first lingered on her shoulder, Nadia understood the unspoken arrangement. She stayed 6 months, developing a routine that minimized their interactions while meeting the unacknowledged expectations just enough to maintain her shelter. The 4th and 5th shelters followed similar patterns: an Indian security guard who offered to share his apartment, then a Yemeni taxi driver who provided a room in his family's home. Each arrangement came with unspoken expectations, each requiring careful emotional detachment, each teaching Nadia to perfect the art of presence without participation, of surrendering her body while protecting what remained of her spirit. By the third year after her escape, Nadia had developed a carefully calibrated system for evaluating these arrangements, assessing the physical safety, the degree of privacy, the nature and frequency of expectations, the exit strategy. She maintained the appearance of gratitude while internally counting days, planning her next move, saving every dirham possible. The fifth shelter with the Yemeni driver proved the most difficult. Ahmed was more possessive than previous benefactors, monitoring her movements, questioning her work schedule, displaying flashes of temper when she maintained boundaries. The apartment was in a remote neighborhood with limited public transportation, increasing her dependence. His family members, initially welcoming, began treating her with the thinly veiled contempt reserved for women of perceived loose moral character. It was during this arrangement that Nadia secured additional work cleaning a high-end art gallery in the financial district, an opportunity that provided both additional income and a critical escape route from Ahmed's increasing control. The gallery closed to the public at 9 p.m., after which she cleaned the immaculate spaces until midnight, carefully dusting around priceless sculptures and meticulously wiping fingerprints from glass cases protecting rare manuscripts. "You have a different touch than the previous cleaners," noted the gallery manager after her second week. "More careful, more respectful of the art." Nadia had nodded without elaboration, maintaining the invisibility that had kept her safe. But privately, she found unexpected solace in these midnight hours surrounded by beauty. After years of surviving in Dubai's shadows, the gallery represented something she had almost forgotten: a world where people created beauty rather than merely consumed it. She couldn't have known that this cleaning position would alter the trajectory of her carefully managed existence. Couldn't have imagined that one night, working later than usual, she would encounter a visitor whose arrival would ultimately connect her past and future in ways both redemptive and tragic. But as she carefully dusted a glass case containing an ancient Arabic manuscript, the gallery's private entrance door opened, admitting a single figure, a well-dressed man who moved with the quiet confidence of ownership. Sheikh Zahir al-Rashid had come to view a new acquisition after hours, unaware that the quiet cleaning woman with chestnut hair would trigger the sequence of events that would eventually lead to both their undoing. Sheikh Zahir al-Rashid moved through his gallery with the proprietary ease of a man accustomed to ownership. At 49, he cut an imposing figure, tall, with a neatly trimmed salt and pepper beard and eyes that missed nothing. His private collection of Middle Eastern art was renowned in exclusive circles, though he rarely allowed public viewing. Tonight, he had come to inspect a newly acquired 14th-century Mamluk manuscript, delivered that afternoon and installed in the central display case. He hadn't expected anyone to be present at this hour. The cleaning staff usually finished by 11, and it was now approaching midnight. Yet there she was, a slender woman carefully wiping the glass of the Eastern display, her movements deliberate and precise. Unlike most cleaners who treated artifacts as mere objects to dust around, she handled each surface as if conscious of what it protected. "You're here late," he observed, his voice causing her to startle visibly. She turned, and Zahir noticed several things simultaneously: her obvious fear quickly masked, her unusual attentiveness to maintaining appropriate distance, and most strikingly, the care with which she positioned herself, always ensuring clear paths to exits. These were not the behaviors of ordinary service workers. "Apologies, sir," she replied in careful Arabic, her accent suggesting Southeast Asian origins, though he couldn't place it precisely. "The installation today created additional dust. I wanted to ensure everything was perfect for tomorrow's private viewing." Something about her demeanor intrigued him, a dignity uncommon in Dubai's vast underclass of service workers. Most would have kept their eyes downcast, responses minimal. She maintained a respectful but direct gaze, her posture revealing neither subservience nor defiance. "What's your name?" he asked, a barely perceptible hesitation. "Nadia Rama, sir." "How long have you been cleaning my gallery, Nadia?" 3 weeks, sir." She folded her cleaning cloth precisely, a gesture he found oddly compelling in its deliberateness. "And what do you think of the collection?" This question visibly surprised her. Employers in Dubai rarely solicited opinions from cleaning staff. She glanced toward the manuscript he had come to inspect. "The Mamluk calligraphy is extraordinary," she said after a moment, then appeared to regret the specific observation. Zahir's interest deepened immediately. You recognize the period? She tensed slightly, as if realizing she had revealed too much. I noticed details. The curved letter forms are distinctive. Indeed they are. He moved closer to the display, gesturing for her to approach. To his surprise, she maintained a careful distance. The manuscript contains astronomical calculations, a star calendar from Cairo. See how the gold leaf catches even minimal light. She nodded, and something in her expression shifted. A momentary dropping of the careful mask she wore. Beauty surviving centuries of darkness, she observed quietly. The comment struck him with unexpected force. It was precisely what had drawn him to collect these pieces, the resilience of beauty amid historical turbulence. Most people saw only monetary value or status symbols in his collection. An unusual observation from a cleaner, he said, studying her more carefully. Perhaps cleaning gives one time to think about what endures and what doesn't. She returned to her cart with practiced efficiency. If you'll excuse me, sir, I should finish before the building closes completely. He found himself reluctant to end the encounter. I'll be installing a new collection next month. Contemporary pieces from conflict zones. Artists creating beauty from destruction. She paused, and he saw genuine interest flicker across her features before the mask of professional detachment returned. The gallery will be spotless for the installation, sir. Perhaps you'd like to see them properly, not just while cleaning. For the first time, he witnessed complete surprise in her expression, followed immediately by calculation, as if assessing potential threat. That's very generous, sir, but unnecessary. I insist, he said, feeling an unusual determination to penetrate her carefully maintained facade. Next Thursday, the gallery will close early for the installation. Come at 7. She offered a noncommittal nod and continued her work. Zahir departed shortly after, his thoughts unexpectedly preoccupied by the enigmatic cleaner with the precise movements and perceptive observations. Nadia did not appear that Thursday, nor did she come to clean that night or the following evening. Zahir found himself unreasonably irritated by her absence, then disturbed by his reaction to a cleaning woman he had spoken with only once. When she reappeared a week later, he happened to be working late in his private office adjacent to the main gallery space. Through the security monitor, he watched her efficient movements, noting how her eyes occasionally lingered on certain pieces, always the most historically significant ones, never the flashiest or most obviously valuable. He entered the gallery without announcement. You didn't come Thursday. She straightened from where she had been carefully dusting a wooden vitrine. No, sir. May I ask why? It seemed inappropriate, she replied with simple directness. Because I'm your employer? Because boundaries exist for reasons. Her eyes held his for a moment longer than strictly necessary. Some lines, once crossed, cannot be redrawn. The comment struck him as unexpectedly philosophical and tellingly specific, not the response of someone concerned merely about workplace propriety. I apologize if my invitation made you uncomfortable. It was professional, not personal. She nodded, accepting his clarification without revealing whether she believed it. The new installation is remarkable. The Syrian photographer's work especially. The observation, knowledgeable, specific, confirmed his initial impression. This woman possessed education and perceptiveness at odds with her current position. You noticed the bullet hole in the camera lens in his self-portrait. Hard to miss when you clean the glass directly in front of it, she responded, a faint smile briefly illuminating her features before disappearing. Would you like me to tell you the story behind it? She hesitated, then nodded once. For the next 20 minutes, Zahir explained the photographer's journey from Aleppo to his eventual asylum in Germany, the specific techniques used to capture light through damaged equipment, the metaphorical significance of creating beauty through instruments of witnessing that had themselves been wounded. Nadia listened with undisguised fascination, asking questions that revealed a sophisticated understanding of both artistic technique and historical context. By the conversation's end, The careful distance she maintained had reduced slightly. "Thank you," she said simply when he finished. "It's been some time since I've had a conversation about something beautiful." The admission felt significant, a small crack in her protective armor. Zahir recognized an opening and took it deliberately. "Perhaps you'd consider a different position. My foundation needs someone to catalog new acquisitions, basic documentation, condition reports. Your attention to detail would be valuable." The offer clearly caught her off guard. He watched complex calculations play out behind her carefully neutral expression, weighing opportunity against risk. "I have no formal qualifications," she said finally. "I prefer natural aptitude to credentials. The position pays 3 times your current wage and includes a private office in the administrative wing." 3 days later, Nadia Rama began work as a junior acquisitions assistant. The position provided what she valued most: legitimacy, increased income, and minimal contact with the public. The small office with its locking door represented a luxury beyond anything she had experienced in the 3 years since her escape. Their professional relationship developed gradually over the following months. Zahir found excuses to review her work personally, impressed by her intuitive understanding of the collection and meticulous documentation. Nadia maintained careful boundaries while gradually revealing more of her intelligence and perceptiveness. Casual conversations about artwork evolved into discussions of philosophy, literature, and history, always initiated by Zahir, always conducted within professional parameters. He found himself increasingly intrigued by the contradictions she embodied: sophisticated understanding paired with obvious gaps in formal education, social grace combined with hypervigilance, beauty deliberately understated. For Nadia, the position offered unprecedented stability. The identity she had constructed, Nadia Rama, quiet professional with a mysterious past, solidified through daily performance. The fear of discovery gradually receded, though never disappeared entirely. She allowed herself small comforts: an apartment with a private bathroom, new clothes purchased without scrutinizing every dirham, occasional meals in modest restaurants rather than street stalls. The shift in their relationship occurred 6 months after her promotion, during preparation for a major exhibition featuring contemporary female artists from across the Middle East. Working late to finalize installation details, they found themselves alone in the gallery after other staff had departed. "What do you see in this piece?" Zahir asked, indicating a large mixed-media work by an Iraqi artist. Fragments of bombed buildings, reconstructed into a delicate mosaic resembling traditional Islamic geometric patterns. Nadia studied it silently before responding. Redemption through reconstruction, taking what's broken and making it not just whole again, but beautiful in a new way. "You see beauty in broken things," he observed, recalling their first conversation. "Perhaps because I've been surrounded by brokenness," she replied, then immediately appeared to regret the personal revelation. "We all carry fragments of our past," Zahir said carefully, sensing the importance of his response. "The question is whether we let them remain jagged edges or reshape them into something new." Her eyes met his directly, something unguarded in her expression for the first time. "Some fragments cut too deeply to be reshaped." "I don't believe that," he countered gently. "I've spent my life collecting beautiful things that survived destruction. Manuscripts that escaped book burnings, sculptures that outlived the civilizations that created them. Survival itself creates a new kind of beauty." The conversation marked a turning point. Personal boundaries remained, but something had shifted. A mutual recognition of depths beneath carefully maintained surfaces. Zahir began inviting her to private viewings, then to curatorial meetings, then to accompany him to auctions and gallery openings. Always in professional contexts, always with plausible business purposes. Nadia accepted these expanded responsibilities with cautious gratitude, gradually allowing herself to imagine a future beyond mere survival. For Zahir, the relationship represented something unexpected in his carefully controlled life. Her perspective on his collection, seeing value beyond monetary worth or prestige, resonated with the idealistic collector he had been in his youth, before acquisitions became merely another expression of wealth and influence. Neither acknowledged the growing personal dimension to their interactions until the night of the Foundation's annual gala. Nadia had helped organize the event but remained deliberately in the background during the celebration. Zahir found her on the balcony overlooking the garden, momentarily escaped from the wealthy donors and art world celebrities filling the main gallery. "You've transformed the Foundation," he said, joining her in the relative quiet. "Attendance is up 40% this year. The education program you developed has waiting lists at every session." She smiled faintly, accepting the compliment with characteristic reserve. "The collection deserves to be experienced, not just displayed." "I'm planning a new acquisition," he said after a comfortable silence. "A private museum at my desert property. Something more permanent than exhibitions. A legacy collection that will outlive both of us." "A beautiful vision," she replied. "I'd like you to help design it." He turned to face her directly. "Not as an employee, Nadia." The implication hung in the air between them. She met his gaze steadily, her expression revealing nothing. "I don't know what you're asking," she said carefully. "I think you do." He took a deliberate step closer. "I've never met anyone who sees beauty the way you do, who understands what I'm trying to preserve." "You don't know me," she said softly. "Not really." "I know what matters," he countered. "Whatever came before, whoever you were before, is less important than who you are now." The statement struck her with unexpected force. 5 years of hiding, of reinvention, of careful performance, and here was someone offering acceptance without full disclosure. The temptation was overwhelming. "I need time," she said finally. Zahir nodded, uncharacteristically patient. "Take whatever time you need." 2 weeks later, in the private garden of his city residence, surrounded by sculptures collected from across the Islamic world, he formally proposed marriage. The ring, a single perfect diamond in a platinum setting of remarkable simplicity, represented not ostentation but permanence. Nadia's acceptance came without the joyous abandon most brides might display. Instead, her yes carried the weight of a decision carefully considered, risks calculated, possibilities weighed. A choice made with open eyes and clear understanding of its implications. Neither could have predicted the consequences that would unfold from this moment of guarded hope, the tragic intersection of past and present that awaited them both. Wedding preparations began immediately, revealing cultural and class divides that Nadia navigated with practiced caution. Zahir's position required certain social conventions, though he agreed to her request for a small, private ceremony rather than the lavish celebration expected of someone of his standing. "My family would expect hundreds of guests, political connections, business associates," he explained during an early planning discussion. "But I've arranged a compromise, a modest ceremony at the desert property, with a larger reception for obligatory appearances to be scheduled later." The compromise suited Nadia perfectly. Every additional guest represented potential exposure, each official document another opportunity for her fabricated identity to unravel. She had maintained the Nadia Rama persona for 5 years through careful limitation of formal interactions. Marriage would require documentation she could not provide, or could only provide through risky falsification. "There will be necessary paperwork," she said carefully, testing dangerous waters. "Handled through private channels," Zahir assured her. "I have connections in the Ministry of Interior who can process our registration with appropriate discretion." The ease with which he circumvented official channels should have troubled her. Instead, she felt only relief, another layer of protection between her constructed present and buried past. More challenging was the medical examination required of all brides in the UAE. The standard procedure included blood tests, general health screening, and documentation of any existing conditions. Nadia knew her body carried evidence of her journey. Scarring from frostbite on her feet, remnants of untreated injuries sustained during her escape and subsequent years in Dubai's shadows. She arranged a private appointment with a female physician at an exclusive clinic catering to expatriate women. Dr. Fawzia Nasrallah, an Egyptian-born doctor with decades of practice in Dubai, conducted the examination with professional detachment until she observed the distinctive pattern of scarring on Nadia's feet. "These injuries are consistent with prolonged exposure to cold," followed by improper healing, she noted, her tone carefully neutral. May I ask how they occurred? Nadia had prepared for such questions. A childhood accident in Indonesia. Our village had limited medical care. Dr. Nasralla's expression revealed nothing, but her next words came deliberately. I have worked in Dubai for 27 years. I have seen many women whose bodies tell stories different from their words. Nadia maintained steady eye contact, neither confirming nor denying the implied understanding. Your fiancé's name is not in your records, the doctor continued. May I ask whom you're marrying? Sheikh Zahir al-Rashid. Something flickered across the doctor's features, recognition, followed by careful recalibration. She completed the examination in silence, then wrote her final report with meticulous care. This document certifies you in excellent health, with no conditions that would preclude marriage, she said, handing Nadia the sealed envelope. Then, more quietly, whatever brought you here, whatever choices you've made to survive, they are yours alone to share or keep private. The interaction left Nadia deeply unsettled. The doctor had clearly recognized something in her condition, perhaps even suspected her true background, yet had chosen discretion over disclosure. It was both reassuring and terrifying, a reminder that others might make different choices if they discovered her truth. As the wedding date approached, Nadia found herself trapped in increasingly elaborate deception. Zahir's genuine desire to know her better led to questions about her past that required careful navigation. Tell me about your childhood in Indonesia, he requested during a private dinner at his city residence. You rarely speak of your family. There's little to tell, she replied, constructing truth from fragments of her actual past and elements of her fabricated identity. My father was a teacher in a small village. My mother died when I was young. I came to Dubai seeking opportunity, like so many others. No siblings. The question touched unexpected pain, memories of Adifir's illness, the catalyst for her fateful decision to leave Indonesia. A brother, she said softly. He was ill when I left. We've lost touch. Zahir reached across the table, taking her hand. We could find him. I have resources, connections. No, she said too quickly, then moderated her tone. That part of my life is finished. Sometimes it's better to leave the past undisturbed. The irony of this conversation, conducted in the home of the man who had unknowingly purchased her 3 years earlier, was not lost on Nadia. Each expression of Zahir's growing affection carried dual significance. Genuine connection between their present selves, shadowed by the grotesque distortion of their unknown past intersection. Yet despite these complications, Nadia found herself developing genuine feelings for Zahir. His passion for preservation, his commitment to celebrating beauty born from destruction, resonated with her own journey. In his presence, she glimpsed possibilities beyond mere survival, purpose, stability, perhaps even happiness. The wedding date was set for a Thursday in late November, chosen for mild desert temperatures and astrological significance in traditional Emirati culture. The desert estate, rarely used by Zahir except as a private retreat, underwent extensive preparation. Landscapers enhanced the natural beauty of the desert setting, creating an elegant oasis around the central courtyard where the ceremony would take place. Nadia selected a wedding dress of remarkable simplicity, ivory silk with minimal embellishment, modern yet respectful of tradition. She chose it partly for its beauty, partly because it required minimal alterations and therefore limited interaction with dressmakers who might ask questions or recognize inconsistencies in her background. The night before the wedding, alone in the guest suite of Zahir's city residence, Nadia performed a private ritual she had maintained throughout her years in hiding. She wrote a letter to her family in her native language, recording the truth of her circumstances, her thoughts, her hopes and fears. Tomorrow she would become someone else again, no longer just Nadia Rama, the carefully constructed survival identity, but Nadia al-Rashid, wife of a prominent sheikh. The letter acknowledged this transition, this latest reinvention of self. Unlike previous letters, stored in her waterproof pouch and carried from residence to residence, she burned this one in the bathroom sink. The ashes represented a symbolic cremation of her past, a necessary sacrifice for the future she had chosen. The desert estate transformed at sunset into something magical, hundreds of lanterns illuminating the path from the main residence to the ceremonial area, where a simple canopy of white fabric billowed gently in the evening breeze. Stars emerged in the darkening sky, impossibly bright away from the city's light pollution. Only 12 guests attended, Zahir's most trusted business associates and their wives, carefully selected friends, and the imam who would perform the ceremony. No photographers were present beyond a single trusted professional hired to document the occasion for private records. Nadia appeared at precisely the appointed hour, walking alone toward the canopy where Zahir waited. Her entrance required no escort. She had no family present to perform traditional roles. The symbolism was not lost on the small gathering. A woman approaching marriage on her own terms, independent and self-possessed. Zahir, dressed in traditional Emirati formal wear, watched her approach with visible emotion. For a man known for his reserve in business dealings, this unguarded expression of feeling struck many guests as remarkable. The connection between bride and groom was palpable, something deeper than conventional romance or social advantage. The ceremony itself was brief, combining Islamic tradition with contemporary simplicity. The marriage contract, prepared by Zahir's private legal team, required only Nadia's signature, the final transformation of identity made official with a single stroke of the pen. As the imam pronounced them husband and wife, Nadia experienced a moment of profound duality. Genuine happiness in this new beginning, shadowed by the knowledge that it was built upon carefully constructed falsehood. The weight of this contradiction manifested physically. A slight trembling of her hands as Zahir placed the wedding ring on her finger. "Are you cold?" he whispered, misinterpreting her reaction. "Just overwhelmed," she replied truthfully. Under the desert stars, surrounded by the gentle glow of lanterns, they shared their first kiss as husband and wife. Nadia allowed herself to be fully present in this moment, to believe in the possibility of redemption, of a future unshackled from her past. The reception followed in the estate's main courtyard, an elegant arrangement of low tables, cushions, and traditional Emirati cuisine prepared by a private chef. Musicians played quietly in one corner, their traditional instruments creating an atmosphere of timeless celebration. Nadia moved among the guests with practiced grace, the role of hostess adding another layer to her performance of identity. She spoke little of herself, deflecting personal questions with gentle humor, redirecting conversations toward the art collection or charitable foundation. Midway through the evening, she noticed Zahir in intense conversation with an older man she recognized as Abdullah al-Mansuri, his closest business associate and advisor. Their expressions suggested disagreement, though both maintained the outward appearance of cordial discussion. When Zahir returned to her side, she sensed tension beneath his smile. "Is everything all right?" she asked quietly. "Abdullah has concerns about our hasty marriage," Zahir replied, his tone dismissive yet carrying an edge. "He believes I should have conducted more thorough background verification before making such a permanent commitment." The comment sent a chill through Nadia despite the warm evening air. "And what did you tell him?" "That my personal life is not subject to board approval," Zahir said firmly, taking her hand. "That I know everything I need to know about the woman I've married." The irony of his confidence was almost unbearable. Nadia smiled, squeezing his hand in acknowledgement, while inwardly calculating new risks. Abdullah al-Mansuri had connections throughout Dubai's government and business community. If he harbored suspicions, if he decided to investigate independently, later in the evening, she overheard fragments of conversation between two guests standing near the reflection pool, voices lowered but still audible in the quiet desert night. Barely known her a year. Convenient timing with the new museum project. No family present, no background. Zahir appeared beside her, his hand possessively at the small of her back. The guests immediately shifted to congratulatory smiles, raising glasses in the couple's direction. Nadia noted the subtle change in Zahir's posture. A stiffening, a barely perceptible increase in the pressure of his hand against her back. "Shall we show them the architectural plans for the museum?" he suggested, his tone pleasant but brooking no refusal. Perhaps that would provide more substantial material for discussion than speculative gossip. The remainder of the reception passed without incident, though Nadia remained acutely aware of undercurrents beneath the celebration's surface. She observed Zahir more carefully. His increased attentiveness, his subtle positioning that kept her always within sight, his swift intervention in any conversation that appeared too personal or probing. These behaviors might have seemed merely protective to outside observers. To Nadia, with her years of hypervigilance and survival instinct, they registered differently. Not as protection but as possession, not as concern but as control. As the last guests departed near midnight, Zahir led her to the master suite, a spectacular space designed to maximize desert views while providing absolute privacy. Floor-to-ceiling windows faced east, positioned to capture the sunrise while revealing nothing to outside observation. "Are you happy, Nadia?" he asked as they stood together on the private terrace. The desert night spread before them like a dark canvas pinpricked with starlight. "Yes," she answered, the single syllable containing complex truth. She was happy in this moment, despite the complications, despite the contradictions, despite the growing awareness that Zahir's affection carried elements of ownership she had not fully recognized before tonight. "Tomorrow begins our real life together," he said, drawing her close. "No more public obligations, no more performances for others. Just us, building something lasting together." She rested her head against his shoulder, allowing herself to believe in his vision of their future. The museum would occupy them for years, designing, collecting, creating a legacy that would outlive them both. Perhaps in that shared purpose, the shadows of her past would finally recede. As Zahir left her briefly to retrieve champagne from inside, Nadia gazed out at the desert expanse. The same terrain she had fled across barefoot 3 years earlier, desperate and terrified. Now she stood here as a bride, ringed by luxury, chosen rather than purchased. The symmetry felt significant, as if the universe had somehow balanced accounts. She could not have known that in less than an hour, this fragile equilibrium would shatter irreparably. That Zahir would return with champagne and 2 crystal glasses, would pour the sparkling liquid, would propose a toast to their future. That she would laugh softly at his earnest declaration, tilting her head in that characteristic gesture of genuine happiness. And that this simple movement would expose the small crescent-shaped scar behind her left ear, the identifying mark meticulously recorded in the documentation for Lot 7, the Indonesian girl purchased for $25,000 3 years earlier. The moment of recognition approached with the inevitability of sunrise. All that remained was the final collision of past and present, the tragic unveiling of truth too long concealed. Zahir returned to the terrace carrying a silver tray with Dom Perignon and 2 crystal flutes. The champagne, vintage 2010, his preferred year, had been chilling in anticipation of this moment. He had orchestrated every detail of their wedding night with characteristic precision, from the timing of sunset to the specific temperature of their suite. "To new beginnings," he said, filling both glasses with the pale gold liquid. The bubbles caught the subtle lighting from the recessed fixtures overhead, tiny constellations rising and disappearing. Nadia accepted the glass, the weight of the crystal unfamiliar in her hand. Despite years working in proximity to luxury, she remained unaccustomed to its casual deployment. The champagne alone represented more than she had earned in her first year of cleaning offices. "And to preservation," she added, extending her glass toward his. "Of beauty, of history, of what matters most." Something in her addition pleased him deeply, her understanding of his core values, her alignment with his vision. The crystal made a perfect, clear tone as their glasses touched. "I've never told anyone this," Zahir said after a moment of companionable silence. "But my collection began as an act of defiance. My father believed art was frivolous, beneath the dignity of serious men. Each piece I acquired was an argument against his worldview." Nadia sipped the champagne, allowing its complex notes to linger on her palate. "And now it's become something more. A testament to survival, beautiful things that outlived the civilizations that created them, the conflicts that threatened them, the people who first possessed them." He gazed out at the desert landscape, its vastness emphasized by the terrace's elevation. Nothing lasts forever, but some things endure longer than others. What a lovely thought, she said, genuinely moved by the sentiment. She laughed softly at the unexpected romance of his philosophical turn, tilting her head in that characteristic gesture of happiness that exposed the delicate curve of her neck. Zahir's eyes caught on something, a small detail suddenly visible in the subtle lighting. Behind her left ear, partially hidden by her hair but revealed by her movement, a crescent-shaped scar, distinctive in its curvature. Time seemed to stop, the moment crystallizing with terrible clarity. His mind raced backward through layers of memory, sorting, comparing, confirming. The catalog on his tablet 3 years earlier. Lot 7. The Indonesian girl with long black hair. The identifying mark noted in her documentation. A crescent-shaped scar behind the left ear. The glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the terrace floor. Champagne splashed across the imported marble, golden droplets catching light like scattered stars. Zahir? Nadia's voice seemed distant despite her proximity. What's wrong? He stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. His expression a complex mixture of shock, recognition, and dawning horror. Your scar, he said, his voice barely audible. Behind your ear. Her hand instinctively rose to cover the mark, a protective gesture that confirmed its significance. It's nothing. A childhood injury. No. The single syllable carried absolute certainty. I've seen it before. The temperature between them seemed to drop despite the warm desert night. Nadia's expression shifted subtly, hypervigilance replacing relaxed intimacy, her body language transforming from comfortable proximity to preparation for threat. What are you talking about? She asked, her tone carefully controlled. 3 years ago. Each word emerged deliberately, as if extracted against resistance. A shipment of women, purchased for domestic service. Understanding bloomed across her features, not surprise but confirmation of a long-held fear. She took an instinctive step backward, calculating distances to doors, to exits, to escape routes. You were on that list? Zahir continued, the pieces assembling themselves with sickening clarity. You were sold to me. Lot 7. They told me the shipment was intercepted. The girls lost at sea. But you. The implications expanded outward like ripples in still water. You escaped. Nadia remained silent, her breathing shallow, her posture now fully alert. 5 years of survival had taught her to recognize pivotal moments, to assess threats with clinical precision. The man before her, her husband of 6 hours, represented the convergence of her past and present in the most devastating possible configuration. Say something, Zahir demanded, his voice rising slightly. What would you like me to say? The calm in her voice belied the rapid calculations occurring behind her eyes. The truth, he said. For once, the complete truth. A decision crystallized in Nadia's mind, a recognition that this moment would define everything that followed. Partial disclosure, continued deception, would only prolong the inevitable. If there was any possibility of salvaging something from this catastrophic intersection, it required absolute honesty. My name is Sari Minang, she said, her native name feeling strange on her tongue after 5 years unused. I was recruited in Indonesia with promises of legitimate domestic work. 18 of us were transported in a shipping container. When we arrived in Dubai, they processed us like merchandise. I was designated Lot 7, purchased for $25,000 by an unknown buyer. Zahir flinched at the clinical recitation, at the confirmation of his role in her story. I didn't know, he said weakly. The broker handled everything. I never saw the conditions, never understood. Don't, she interrupted, a flash of genuine anger breaking through her controlled facade. Don't pretend ignorance absolves responsibility. You knew exactly what you were purchasing. The truth of her accusation hung between them, impossible to deflect or deny. Zahir had indeed known, had selected her from a catalog of young women presented for his consideration. had transferred funds with full awareness of the transaction's nature. I escaped during delivery, she continued, her voice steady despite the emotional undertow. I ran into the desert from a villa in Al-Barari. Your villa. Recognition flickered across his features. They told me you were lost at sea, that the entire shipment had been intercepted by authorities. A convenient lie to protect your conscience. Zahir moved toward the terrace railing, needing physical support as the implications expanded. His wife, the woman whose perceptiveness and resilience he had admired, whose understanding of beauty had resonated with his deepest values, had been merchandise he had purchased. Every moment of their relationship reconfigured itself in this new context, revealing grotesque distortions beneath apparent connection. What happened after you escaped? He asked finally, still facing away from her. I survived, she replied simply. A nurse found me, helped me create new documentation. I became Nadia Rama. I cleaned offices, worked in laundromats, stayed invisible. I moved every 3 months, avoided cameras, paid only in cash. I did whatever was necessary to remain undetected. And the 5 men? His question emerged without context, yet something in his tone suggested specific knowledge. Nadia went still. What 5 men? I had you investigated, Zahir admitted, turning to face her. Not thoroughly. I respected your privacy too much for that, but enough to know you lived with 5 different men before securing independent housing. The report was discreet, mentioned no names, no details beyond basic timeline. The revelation of this investigation, conducted without her knowledge, retained without disclosure, shifted the balance between them yet again. Her expression hardened. Yes, 5 men, she confirmed coldly. 5 different shelters in exchange for 5 different versions of compliance. The elderly shopkeeper who wanted a servant. The foreman who expected physical intimacy. The restaurant owner who paraded me before his friends. The security guard with wandering hands. The taxi driver who treated me as property. Each description emerged precisely without emotional inflection. Survival has costs, Zahir. Costs paid in dignity, in autonomy, in safety. Her words struck him with physical force, each revelation adding weight to his complicity. He had believed himself her savior, her path to legitimacy. Instead, he was simply the latest in a sequence of men who had seen her as something to be possessed. And me? He asked, dreading her answer. Was I just another shelter? Another calculation of survival? At first, she admitted, her honesty now absolute. You represented safety, legitimacy, protection. But it became more. I grew to admire your passion for preservation, your understanding of beauty's resilience. I wasn't lying when I accepted your proposal. But you were never going to tell me, he said, the realization emerging with certainty. About your past, about who you really were, about the connection between us. How could I? Her question contained no defensiveness, only pragmatic assessment. The moment you knew, everything would change, exactly as it has now. Silence descended between them, the desert night continuing its indifferent progression of stars across the sky. The shattered champagne glass remained on the terrace floor, its fragments catching light like warning signals. What happens now? She asked finally, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. The question forced Zahir to confront the consequences radiating outward from this revelation. His new wife was living evidence of criminal activity, human trafficking connected directly to his name, his finances, his reputation. If her story became public, everything he had built would collapse. His business empire, his philanthropic foundation, his carefully constructed public image. Years of prison would be the minimal consequence. Fear tightened his chest like a vice, primitive and overwhelming. His breathing accelerated, thoughts racing toward self-preservation with instinctual urgency. No one can know about this, he said, the words emerging with desperate intensity. No one, Sari. It would destroy everything. Not just me, but the foundation, the collection, everything we've built. Everything you've built, she corrected quietly. And my name is Nadia now. Sari died in that shipping container. She moved toward the suite's interior, her steps deliberate, her posture revealing nothing of her intentions. Zahir watched her retrieve her phone from the bedside table, his anxiety spiking as she unlocked the screen. "What are you doing?" he demanded, crossing the threshold from terrace to bedroom. "Calling Maria," she replied calmly. "The nurse who found me. She should know I'm safe." Panic overrode reason. In 3 quick strides, Zahir reached her, his hand closing around her wrist with instinctive urgency. "You can't call anyone. Not now. We need to think this through carefully." "Let go of me," Nadia said, her voice low but firm. "Now. Just listen," he insisted, tightening his grip. "We need time to figure this out together, to protect both of us." She attempted to pull away, her movements practiced and precise, the muscle memory of previous escapes from unwanted restraint. Zahir, unprepared for her resistance, pulled back reflexively, creating a struggle neither had intended to initiate. Her foot caught on the edge of the hand-woven Persian carpet. The phone clattered to the floor as she stumbled backward, Zahir still gripping her wrist. Her momentum carried her toward the bedroom's far wall, where a marble side table displayed a priceless Ming Dynasty vase, an anniversary gift from Zahir to himself, commemorating 10 years of collecting. The impact happened with cinematographic clarity, her temple connecting with the table's sharp edge as she fell, the hollow sound of bone against stone, her body crumpling with sudden limpness. The vase wobbled but remained intact, witnessing what it could not record. "Nadia!" Zahir released her wrist, dropping to his knees beside her. Blood appeared with alarming speed, a crimson stream from the impact site tracing the delicate architecture of her cheekbone. "Nadia, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered, focusing briefly on his face before losing coherence. Her breathing changed, shallow, then irregular, then ominously slowing. "Stay with me," he urged, pressing his hand against the wound, trying to stem the bleeding. "I'll call an ambulance. Just stay with me." But even as he reached for his phone, he recognized the specific progression occurring before him, the dilating pupils, the slackening facial muscles, the distinctive pattern of breathing that preceded its cessation. He had witnessed death once before, when his father suffered a stroke in his presence. The human body followed predictable protocols when major systems began to fail. "No, no, no," he whispered, desperation mounting as he dialed emergency services. The call connected, but before he could speak, Nadia exhaled, a long, soft sound like surrender, and did not inhale again. Zahir dropped the phone, his bloody fingers leaving prints on its screen. He attempted CPR with frantic determination, pressing rhythmically on her sternum, breathing into her unresponsive mouth, repeating the sequence with increasing desperation. Minutes passed, measured by his counting. Compressions in sets of 30, followed by 2 rescue breaths, again and again until his arms ached and his vision blurred with tears of exertion and dawning grief on the fallen phone. A tinny voice continued asking for information, for location. For the nature of the emergency, Zahir remained deaf to these inquiries, focused entirely on the woman before him. Nadia, who was sorry, his wife who had been his property, the museum curator who had once been merchandise in his catalog. Finally, biological reality asserted itself with undeniable clarity. She was gone, victim of a subdural hematoma, blood pooling between brain and skull, death occurring within minutes of impact. An accident, unintentional but definitive, with consequences that would reshape everything that followed. Zahir sat back on his heels, blood on his hands, champagne drying on the terrace floor, the desert night continuing its impassive progression beyond the windows. Not a monster, he told himself. Just a man who chose self-preservation over her truth. Again, reaching for his phone, he terminated the emergency call without response. Then, with hands that trembled slightly, he scrolled to a different contact, his private physician, not emergency services. A man who had handled discreet medical situations for the Al-Rashid family for decades, whose loyalty had been purchased through generations of patronage. "Dr. Khalid," he said when the call connected, his voice steadier than seemed possible under the circumstances. I need you at the desert property immediately. There's been an accident. A pause as he listened to the response. Yes, it's urgent. My wife, she fell. A tragic accident on our wedding night. As he waited for the doctor's arrival, Zahir remained beside Nadia's body, his mind moving with mechanical precision through the necessary steps that would follow. The death certificate listing accident as cause. The private cremation that would eliminate forensic evidence. The discreet disposal of ashes. The carefully constructed narrative that would explain her absence without inviting investigation. Not for the first time, the infrastructure of wealth and privilege would create a separate system of consequences, insulating him from the justice that might apply to others. The same privilege that had allowed him to purchase a woman 3 years earlier would now facilitate the disappearance of her body, her identity, her truth. The irony was not lost on him. He had built his reputation preserving beautiful things that had survived destruction. Yet here was something beautiful he could not preserve, something he himself had destroyed, however unintentionally. The contradiction would haunt whatever remained of his life. Dr. Khalid Abbasi arrived at the desert estate 47 minutes after Zahir's call. The elderly physician had served 3 generations of the Al-Rashid family, his discretion as valued as his medical expertise. He entered the master suite with the quiet efficiency of a man accustomed to crisis, medical bag in hand, expression revealing nothing beyond professional focus. She fell, Zahir explained, still kneeling beside Nadia's body. Hit her head on the table edge. I tried CPR, but... He gestured helplessly at the evidence before them. Dr. Khalid conducted a perfunctory examination, confirming what Zahir already knew. Subdural hematoma, he pronounced clinically. Death would have occurred rapidly, regardless of intervention. What do we do? Zahir asked, his voice hollow. The question encompassed more than medical procedure, and both men understood its broader implications. Dr. Khalid removed his stethoscope, regarding Zahir with the specific combination of deference and authority he had perfected over decades of service to powerful men. Official protocol would require police notification, forensic examination, formal investigation, he stated neutrally. However, given the circumstances, your recent marriage, your position, the potential for misinterpretation, there are alternative approaches. Zahir nodded once, the decision crystallizing with terrible clarity. Alternative approaches, he repeated, the euphemism absolving both men of explicitly acknowledging what would follow. I can issue a death certificate citing accidental death, Dr. Khalid continued, removing forms from his bag. A tragic fall, fatal head trauma. With the appropriate authorizations, cremation could be arranged within hours rather than days. Is that legal? The question emerged despite Zahir's understanding that legality had become secondary to necessity. There are provisions for expedited procedures in certain circumstances, Dr. Khalid replied carefully. Religious considerations, public health concerns, diplomatic sensitivities. With your connections, the necessary authorizations can be secured without difficulty. The implicit message was clear. For men of Zahir's standing, legal requirements were flexible, bureaucratic obstacles navigable. The infrastructure of privilege would facilitate whatever narrative he chose to construct. Make the arrangements, Zahir said finally, rising from his position beside Nadia's body. Complete discretion is essential. Dr. Khalid nodded, already completing the death certificate with practiced penmanship. I'll need your signature here, he indicated, authorizing cremation under the medical confidentiality clause. Zahir signed without reading the document, his hand moving with automatic precision. The formality completed, Dr. Khalid made several calls from his personal phone, speaking in rapid Arabic that Zahir, despite his fluency, found difficult to follow in his current state. Transportation will arrive within the hour, the doctor informed him after concluding the final call. The cremation facility in Al-Quaz can accommodate our requirements tonight. The process will be complete before dawn. Zahir nodded mechanically, his mind already constructing the narrative that would explain Nadia's absence to the world. A sudden illness requiring extended treatment abroad. a private family emergency necessitating immediate departure. Eventually, perhaps, a tragic accident in some distant location, body unrecoverable, memorials conducted without remains. What about her belongings? Dr. Khalid asked, his pragmatic inquiry forcing Zahir to confront immediate logistical challenges. I'll handle that, Zahir replied. There's very little. She lived simply. This understatement, referring to a woman who had maintained minimal possessions as a strategy for rapid relocation if discovered, struck Zahir with unexpected force. Even as his wife, Nadia had retained the survival habits of a fugitive, ready to disappear at a moment's notice. After Dr. Khalid departed to supervise transportation arrangements, Zahir remained alone with Nadia's body. The blood had stopped flowing, congealing along her temple and cheek in dark rivulets. Her eyes, partially open, reflected nothing of the intelligence and perceptiveness that had first drawn him to her. The transformation was absolute, the animate becoming inanimate, the person becoming object. With mechanical precision, Zahir began the process that would erase Nadia Rama from existence. He located her phone, still on the floor where it had fallen, and systematically deleted all contacts, messages, photographs. The device itself would be physically destroyed later, its components separated and disposed of in different locations. From her small suitcase, he removed the few personal items she had brought to the desert property, clothing selected with characteristic understated elegance, basic toiletries, a notebook containing observations about artworks being considered for the museum collection. Nothing personal, nothing revealing identity or history. Even in marriage, she had maintained the careful anonymity that had kept her safe for 5 years. Only when he opened the hidden compartment in her suitcase lining did Zahir discover the single item that breached this discipline of anonymity. A small waterproof pouch containing handwritten letters in Indonesian, dates spanning the years since her escape. He could not read the language but recognized names repeated throughout. Adifir, her brother; Ibu, her mother; Bapak, her father. The only tangible connection to the identity she had been forced to abandon. Zahir hesitated, the letters representing something sacred amid the calculated erasure he was conducting. Then, with deliberate movement, he returned them to the pouch, placing it in his safe rather than destroying it. Some fragment of her truth deserved preservation, even if never disclosed. The transportation team arrived as promised. 2 men in medical uniforms driving an unmarked van with tinted windows. They transferred Nadia's body with professional efficiency, wrapping it in a sterile body bag, securing it on a gurney, loading it into the vehicle without unnecessary conversation. Dr. Khalid accompanied them, ensuring continuous supervision of the process that would follow. Zahir did not attend the cremation. Instead, he remained at the desert property, methodically removing evidence of what had occurred. The blood-stained carpet was rolled and replaced with an identical piece from storage. The marble side table, instrument of unintentional death, was relocated to a different room, its position filled with a similar piece from elsewhere in the property. The shattered champagne glass on the terrace was swept away, its fragments disposed of with the rest of the evening's waste. By dawn, the master suite showed no indication of tragedy, restored to pristine condition through the invisible mechanisms that maintained Zahir's various properties. Only he knew what had transpired, what had been lost, what had been concealed. Dr. Khalid returned at precisely 5:17 a.m., carrying a simple ceramic urn containing Nadia's ashes. The procedure is complete, he reported. All documentation has been processed through appropriate channels. Medical confidentiality provisions ensure privacy. There will be no further inquiry. Zahir accepted the urn with steady hands, its weight insignificant relative to its contents. Thank you, doctor. Your service to my family remains invaluable. The physician departed with a formal bow, leaving Zahir alone with the physical remains of his wife of less than 12 hours. He carried the urn to the terrace where they had shared champagne the previous evening, where the revelation had triggered the sequence of events culminating in her death. The desert dawn was beginning, the eastern sky lightening from black to indigo to pale blue, the temperature still cool before the day's inevitable heat. Zahir opened the urn, the fine ash inside stirring slightly in the gentle morning breeze. With methodical movements, he scattered the ashes across the desert landscape below the terrace, returning Nadia to the terrain she had crossed barefoot during her escape 3 years earlier, completing a circle neither of them could have anticipated. The ash disappeared almost immediately, indistinguishable from the desert sand, leaving no trace of its human origin. The disposal complete, Zahir returned to the suite and made a series of calls to key staff members, implementing the next phase of erasure. Nadia's personal belongings from his city residence would be boxed and donated to charity through anonymous channels. Her modest apartment, maintained even after marriage as a private retreat, would be cleared, its contents similarly dispersed. Her employment records at the foundation would be archived under confidentiality provisions, accessible only through specific authorization that would never be granted. By mid-morning, Zahir had constructed the narrative that would explain her absence. A family emergency in Indonesia requiring immediate departure, details appropriately vague, timeline uncertain. The story was disseminated to essential staff members with instructions to respect privacy by deflecting inquiries without elaboration. The final step in the official erasure came with a call to his contact at the Ministry of Interior, the same official who had facilitated their discreet marriage registration. The documentation for Nadia Rama requires special handling, Zahir explained, employing the euphemisms they had established through previous transactions. Complete confidentiality protocol. Understood, the official replied without requesting clarification. The records will be sequestered under diplomatic provision, effectively inaccessible without your explicit authorization. This administrative burial, the bureaucratic equivalent of the physical cremation, completed the official elimination of Nadia Rama. To all formal systems, she would become a ghost, present in minimal records but practically invisible, her existence reduced to sealed files and restricted databases. Only one loose end remained: Maria, the Filipino nurse who had found Sari/Nadia in the desert, who had facilitated her transformation, who had remained connected to her throughout the years of hiding. The woman Nadia had attempted to call before the fatal accident. Zahir considered options with cold precision. The nurse represented potential exposure, someone who knew Nadia's true identity, who might question her sudden disappearance, who might pursue inquiries that others would not. Yet, eliminating this risk through direct means would require actions Zahir was unwilling to contemplate. Despite everything, he maintained boundaries around certain moral thresholds. Instead, he implemented an indirect approach, having his security team locate Maria's current address and employment, then arranging financial opportunities that would remove her from Dubai entirely. A job offer from a prestigious hospital in Manila, significantly above market rate. An apartment provided as part of the compensation package. Airfare for immediate departure. The kind of opportunity that seemed providential rather than suspicious, that few in Maria's position would question or decline. Within 48 hours of Nadia's death, the erasure was complete. No body, no investigation, no public record, no witnesses with motivation to pursue uncomfortable questions. The infrastructure of wealth and influence had functioned as designed, creating a separate system of consequences accessible only to those with sufficient resources and connections. 1 year later, Sheikh Zahir al-Rashid stood in the completed museum at his desert property, surrounded by carefully preserved artifacts spanning centuries of human creativity. The building itself had been redesigned following Nadia's death, its architecture more austere, its exhibition spaces more contemplative. Critics had praised its profound emotional resonance and meditation on impermanence, unaware of the personal tragedy informing its evolution. Zahir moved through the galleries with practiced composure, greeting major donors and cultural ministers with appropriate cordiality. The opening represented the culmination of his collecting career, a permanent institution that would outlive him, preserving beauty that had survived destruction. Yet beneath this public performance, private consequences accumulated with increasing weight. Sleep had become elusive, haunted by dreams where Nadia appeared, sometimes as the curator he had married, sometimes as the merchandise he had purchased, sometimes as the bloodied figure on his bedroom floor. He had withdrawn from social engagements beyond professional obligations, his desert property becoming less a retreat than a self-imposed exile. Most significantly, he had redirected substantial resources toward anti-trafficking organizations, anonymous donations funding rescue operations, legal advocacy rehabilitation programs. The contributions represented a form of penance that could never approach adequacy, a gesture toward atonement that would forever remain incomplete. In quieter moments, Zahir sometimes removed the waterproof pouch from his safe, holding the letters he could not read but preserved nonetheless. The only tangible evidence that Sari Minang had existed, that the woman known as Nadia Rama had once been someone else, with family, with history, with connections beyond the truncated identity constructed for survival. Occasionally, he considered attempting to locate her family in Indonesia, to provide financial support that might alleviate whatever conditions had driven her to accept false promises of opportunity abroad. But such action risked exposing the very truth he had worked so methodically to conceal. Instead, he established a foundation providing educational scholarships for young women from rural Indonesian communities. Another gesture of inadequate atonement. Another attempt to balance accounts that could never be balanced. The irony remained inescapable. Zahir had built his reputation and identity around preserving beautiful things that had survived destruction. Yet when confronted with the human embodiment of such survival, a woman who had endured trafficking, exploitation, and extreme hardship while maintaining her essential dignity, he had chosen self-preservation over truth, had participated in her erasure rather than her preservation. On the anniversary of their wedding, Zahir returned alone to the spot in the desert where he had scattered Nadia's ashes. The terrain remained unchanged, indifferent to human events, unaltered by human grief, continuing its ancient cycles of wind and sand and occasional rain. He stood in silence as the sun set, marking a full year since their brief marriage and its tragic conclusion. Unknown to Zahir, another figure visited the desert that same evening, arriving after his departure. Maria, who had accepted the hospital position in Manila but returned occasionally to Dubai on professional exchanges, placed a small arrangement of white jasmine flowers on the sand, performing a private ritual of remembrance. Unlike Zahir, Maria knew portions of Sari/Nadia's true story, her trafficking, her escape, her years of precarious survival. Unlike Zahir, she harbored suspicions about the circumstances of Nadia's disappearance, about the coincidence of her vanishing immediately following her marriage to a powerful man with resources to facilitate such vanishing. Unlike Zahir, she maintained no illusions about the separate systems of justice operating in Dubai, about the impunity wealth could purchase, about the disposability of certain lives. Yet like Zahir, Maria understood the futility of pursuing inquiries that would find no receptive authorities, that would encounter only sealed records and diplomatic provisions and confidentiality clauses. The mechanisms that had erased Nadia Rama were designed specifically to withstand challenges from people like Maria, people without power, without connections, without resources to penetrate official barriers. And so she placed flowers on unmarked sand, speaking quiet words in her native Tagalog, a prayer for peace, for justice in some realm beyond human systems, for the soul of a woman who had survived so much only to disappear without witness or acknowledgement. To the desert wind, to the indifferent night sky, to whatever forces might record what human systems had erased, Maria spoke the truth that official records would never contain. Her name was Sari Minang. She existed. She matters. Remember her.